Bom dia a todos e todas que estão aqui com a gente nessa live. É uma alegria recebê-los aqui. Meu nome é Isaf Karaui, eu sou gestora científica do GP Tecnologias e Culturas Digitais da Intercom. E hoje a gente tem a Maratona TCDIG, que é uma maratona toda dedicada a influenciadores digitais e a temática das controvérsias. É um dia de evento, então a gente começa agora às 10 da manhã com uma palestra, depois às 14, uma mesa redonda, e a gente termina o nosso dia às 16, também com uma mesa redonda, todas elas dedicadas à temática dos influenciadores digitais. Para quem não conhece, o GP Tecnologias e Culturas Digitais é um GP da Intercom, um GP que vem se dedicando a investigar temáticas relacionadas a plataformas e comunicação digital, e por isso um evento sobre influenciadores. Também esse evento faz parte das pesquisas relacionadas ao meu pós-doutorado, que o GP muito gentilmente acolheu. Então, a gente realizou esse evento combinado aí para poder pensar como andam as discussões sobre influenciadores digitais no Brasil. Hoje a gente tem dois convidados muito especiais, convidados que vêm apresentar suas pesquisas na Europa sobre influenciadores digitais e controvérsias. Mas antes de ouvi-los, antes de começarmos o nosso evento, eu quero que vocês deem as boas-vindas para o nosso coordenador, vice-coordenador do GP Tecnologias e Culturas Digitais, o William Araújo, que vai também dar as boas-vindas para todo mundo que está aqui com a gente.
Obrigado, Isaf. Parabéns pela organização desse excelente evento. É uma oportunidade muito interessante assim, de discutir o tema dos influenciadores. E a gente, do grupo o grupo de pesquisa em tecnologias e culturas digitais, está muito feliz de dar continuidade aos nossos ciclos de discussões aqui no YouTube, né, com um evento tão qualificado como esse. Então, primeiramente, gostaria de agradecer o empenho e parabenizar pelo desenvolvimento, né, pela organização dessa programação. Então, esse é o nosso terceiro ciclo deste ano, né, o primeiro neste segundo semestre. Nosso objetivo, então, no GP de Tecnologias e Culturas Digitais é oportunizar em espaços abertos como o YouTube, algumas discussões que possam qualificar o debate que a gente faz no próprio GP e também popularizar algumas discussões feitas no nosso grupo. O nosso grupo, então, ele tem já mais de 20 anos de atuação dentro da Intercom, né, e é um dos espaços mais abertos e democráticos para acolher estudantes que estudam aí tecnologias digitais, né, apropriação dessas tecnologias no âmbito cultural também. Então, em nome da nossa coordenadora, Luísa Santos, que infelizmente não pôde estar aqui por questão de agenda, gostaria de dar boas-vindas a todo mundo e convidar que vocês continuem acompanhando as iniciativas do GP, seja no nosso Instagram, seja no nosso Twitter, mas principalmente aqui no YouTube, onde a gente sempre vai ter conteúdo qualificado, né, semestralmente, trazendo debates importantes para quem pensa e para quem pesquisa tecnologias e culturas digitais. Além disso, eu queria convidá-los para, no ano que vem, participarem presencialmente aí do nosso grupo, né, que ocorrerá dentro da Intercom, como de praxe, e a Intercom deve acontecer em Belo Horizonte, né, na PUC de Minas. Então, vai ser um prazer recebê-los, né? A gente sempre preza por um debate com muita qualidade acadêmica, mas também muito fraterno. Vai ser muito interessante conhecê-los e conhecê-las e poder ter trocas acadêmicas, né, e de vida neste espaço e neste evento. Então, desejo um ótimo evento para todo mundo hoje, nessa sexta-feira. Volto às 16 horas aí na mesa que vai discutir, né, um pouco vai trazer um pouco das discussões sobre governamentalidade e como as plataformas atuam na gestão da relação com os influencers. E acho que é isso, um ótimo debate para todo mundo. E muito obrigado aos nossos dois excelentes palestrantes da primeira sessão de hoje.
Obrigada, William. Bem, eu vou já puxar o finalzinho da fala do William. O William é nosso vice-coordenador, de novo, está aqui representando toda a nossa comissão de gestão do GP, que é composta pela Luísa Santos, que é a nossa coordenadora, e também pela Ana Luísa Figueiredo, que cuida da gestão de conteúdo. E hoje, gente, só para vocês se situarem, para quem não conhece a programação do dia, tá no Instagram do GP, já a gente coloca aqui para vocês o nosso arroba, mas é GP TCDIG, mas a gente tem a nossa palestra agora de abertura, depois, às 14, uma palestra intitulada Somos Todos Blogueirinhas, Controvérsias da Presença Digital de Profissionais nas Plataformas de Redes Sociais, e a gente fecha o dia com uma mesa redonda às 16 sobre influenciadores e relações controversas com as plataformas. Mas, para a gente começar agora, a palestra de abertura é uma palestra chamada Monetizing Controversy, Clout Chasing on Social Media, uma palestra que vai discutir como criadores de conteúdo monetizam controvérsias dentro das plataformas de redes sociais. Os pesquisadores que vão aqui conversar com a gente trabalham com esse conceito de clout chasing, que é uma prática que se refere à busca por influência por meio de ações controversas. Então, a ideia é que a gente possa entender um pouco essa realidade que, apesar de ser apontada por pesquisadores que estão estudando lá nos Países Baixos, acho que dialoga muito com a realidade brasileira. E vou apresentar para vocês os nossos convidados do dia, vou colocá-los na tela, só para vocês olharem para a carinha deles aqui. Thales and Catalina are our guests today. I'm going to present their CV for you to know them in Portuguese, and then I'm going to give them the word so we can hear what they have to share with us. Então, a Catalina, ela é professora adjunta em Direito e Tecnologia na Universidade de Utrecht, na Holanda, Países Baixos. Ela também é autora do livro The Regulation of Social Media Influencers, que foi publicado em 2020. Depois a gente também coloca para vocês o link. É um livro que tem partes gratuitas, então fica também indicação de leitura. Ela é líder do projeto Human Ads, que tem financiamento do European Research Council, que é uma pesquisa, um grupo de pesquisa que está focado em entender o impacto da monetização de conteúdo nas mídias sociais e no direito a partir do contexto de governança das plataformas. E o Thales Bertaglia, ele é brasileiro, vejam só, mas está também na Holanda fazendo essa pesquisa de doutorado. Então, ele é pesquisador de doutorado orientado pela Catalina e ele investiga no Instituto de Ciências de Dados da Universidade de Maastricht. E a pesquisa do Thales se concentra na aplicação de métodos computacionais para entender a influência dos criadores de conteúdo e da monetização de conteúdo nas mídias sociais. O Thales é mestre em Ciências da Computação e Matemática Computacional pela Universidade de São Paulo. Então vejam que a nossa conversa de hoje ela é também interdisciplinar, o que para a gente é super importante. So, Catalina and Thales, it's a great pleasure to have you both here with us today. I had the honor to meet Catalina at the University of Amsterdam this year, so it's great to see you again and have this opportunity to talk and listen to what Thales have to share with us today as well. So the stage is yours. Take the time you need to make your presentation. I'm going to be here and visible for a while. And when you finish, I'll come back with the questions and answers. And for our audience, para todo mundo que está aqui acompanhando, sintam-se à vontade para mandar questões no chat ao longo da fala do Thales e da Catalina. Em português e em inglês, eu faço aqui uma tradução para eles, para a gente poder conversar ao longo da apresentação. Fiquem muito à vontade para mandar as falas de vocês, tá bom? So, thanks once again, Catalina and Thales, and I'm going to put your presentation here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Isa, for your very kind introduction. Thank you so much, William, for welcoming us to this wonderful event. It is a pleasure for us to participate from the Netherlands, from the small city of Maastricht. So good morning, Brazil. We are excited to be in the presence of various disciplines that we normally do not interact with because, as Isa was mentioning earlier, I'm a legal scholar. Thales is a computational social media scholar, and we always are interested in learning more from other disciplines, from other experts about the topic that we are doing research on. And that topic is very, very vital in today's digital economy because it deals with the way in which people are making money on the internet, and particularly the way in which individuals as entrepreneurs, influencers, content creators, as we will be referring to them, manage to create a lot of money on the internet. As indicated before, I'm Catalina Goanta. I'm affiliated with Utrecht University, and the reason why I'm mentioning this again is because the project that Isaf mentioned right now is also hiring. So if you're going to be interested in the presentation today, please do get in touch with me. I will. I already have actually the email address on the last slide, so do get in touch with me. I will come back to this point in a second. But here today with Thales, who I'm always very excited to present with. We're going to present to you some glimpses of different types of papers that we have been publishing in the past 2 years. One particular paper that Isaf already mentioned, monetizing controversy, but we will also be giving you some more insights into some upcoming research that is more computational. So our presentation for the next around 1 hour, but feel free if you have any kind of questions, particularly Isaf, if you would like to jump in, or William, if you would like to make any kind of remarks during our presentation, by all means. So what we are going to do is just divide this time in two. And first, we're going to take you on a journey of social media monetization, just share with you our perspectives and our findings based on around 5 years of following this particular theme on different types of social media platforms, and with the occasion and also with the opportunity of sharing with you some insights from a rather innovative data set that Thales will particularly speak about. On Instagram, we have 12 years of data that we would like to share some insights from with you. The second part of our presentation deals with the topic of controversy. So after we will look at monetization from a general perspective, we're also going to ask the question, well, how does controversy get monetized, and how do we see any kind of differences? What are the practices? And we focus also on a rather empirical exercise, but this time not to show you outcomes and not to show you results, but rather to think with you and to hear your criticism and to reflect critically with you on some of the problems and also some of the pitfalls that we have identified in the attempt of actually trying to measure controversy. So we're going to go back and forth and ping pong a few times throughout the presentation, just to make sure that we get enough angles that are of interest for you. And I think in what follows, then Thales is going to take you on the social media monetization journey.
Yes, thank you, Catalina, and thanks everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's really great to be among other Brazilian researchers, and it's really inspiring to see great work that everyone's been doing, especially in the recent times that have been difficult. Yeah, it's really nice to be here, and I hope things get better soon. Yeah, so my background is in computer science. I've been working on this since I started my PhD in 2020, so for a few years, and I've been working with Catalina, so I have this interdisciplinary view on things, but my background is computer science, so I'll bring some of those insights. I'll tell you a bit about computational research, what we do and what we can do. And as a starting point, let's just go through monetization in social media. So I'll just talk about what we mean by monetization, what kind of things we analyze, some basic concepts. Then I'll show some data we've been working with, some of the research we do, and then we move to controversy. So let's start with one example here, internet monetization.
For me, I really like corn.
What do you like about corn?
It's corn! A big corn Vietnam. It has the juice. And imagine the most beautiful thing. It's corn! I can tell you all about it. I mean, look at this thing. Gonna find it without amazing thing.
So you probably are familiar with this. So the original video is an interview by this content creator, Recess Therapy, that interviews kids. And this kid was particularly charismatic. And this is just a remix of the song on TikTok. And it got viral, really big. It got really big. And you can see here on Cameo. So Cameo is this website that celebrities, content creators, like anyone really can, create short videos. You pay a certain amount, they create a short video, a personalized video. And you can see here, it's booked from 220 euros. So this kid just randomly, after appearing in one interview, got super famous and can make a lot of money. So I think this represents really well the moment we are in right now. That this idea that anyone can become a celebrity and anyone can become a content creator and an influencer, and not necessarily big. So we also have this more recent phenomenon, like people that have influence, but not necessarily with a big following. So this, for instance, this niche micro celebrities are people that are relevant within a certain niche, within a certain context. So they might be just influencers for a particular city, or they have a particular occupation, like they work on a certain job and they create content about that. So it's not even about engagement like numbers. You can also have impact and influence and make money even for smaller followings. And this is something that's relatively new, considering the internet, how long the internet has been around. This is very new, like making money from the internet. It's a recent phenomenon. This is an article from 2001, so 20 years ago. And you can see that, well, people were engaging in controversial practices even back then. So this is a couple auctioning the right to name an unborn baby. But it shows that it wasn't easy. Like, you could make money. The internet was more about the direct selling, so you could sell products and you could engage in commerce and things like that. But compared to nowadays, the amount of ways of making money and the number of possibilities that anyone can get to make money on the internet, this is new and this is impressive and scary, and it provides us a lot of research opportunities, and that's why we're doing this. We can see here a Google search. How do you make money? You don't even add on the internet. Like, how do you make money automatically? Like, the most searched things are internet and social media. So basically, making money online is making money through social media. It's even, like, you see, the social media platforms are even above the stock market, so even more popular than traditional investing things. And this is really interesting. It shows that people in general are interested in becoming content creators, in engaging with the content economy. And when we talk about influencers, maybe this is the traditional, the first thing that comes to mind, like this, for instance, James Charles and Tati, like these traditional YouTubers, talking about beauty, makeup, fashion, that became really popular in the early to mid 2010s. So basically, they create content about something, they have some endorsements, they endorse some products, they have some brand partnerships. So this is the traditional view. But we have much more than that. So this is probably how influencer marketing started getting big. These were the first ones to really get big and to create the image we have of an influencer. But the economy is very diverse and it's very big. So these are some numbers from 2020. They come from different sources, marketing firms and surveys and things like that. So they're not 100% reliable, but they give us a very nice overview of the size of the economy. And we can see it's huge. It's literally millions of people. We have professional, so people who are making money, and amateur people who are trying to get into the creator economy. I think this is a really nice overview of the different phases. So phase one, when these media platforms were launched, and probably back then, the idea wasn't like they started with a different idea. So they were much more about peer-to-peer interaction. So for instance, YouTube was about, you can upload your videos, you can send them to your family, and you can share them with your friends. The original idea was not getting to this point. And then the second phase, the start of the emergence of influencer marketing. So what I was talking about with like James Charles and Tati, like that kind of thing. So you have a creator that has a big audience, and a brand thinks that, okay, they might be relevant to promote a product, and they have a partnership and they promote the product. And now we are in the phase 3 that we have the content creators as business. So it's not only about influencer marketing anymore, not only just about promoting products. You have many ways to make money. You have many ways to monetize your content. And basically the content creators themselves are the product. Like, they can do many different things. So we have a few examples here. So we can self-help engagement, like the Cameo thing, the first video I showed. We have project-based funding, courses. This is a really nice overview of the different most frequent monetization models. So influencer marketing, the first one, we already talked about that. So you have a brand that might hire has an ad agency, and then that intermediates through a talent agency, a creator. And that can be an endorsement, so a creator just posts a video or a story or something talking about something positive about a product. It can also be affiliate marketing, so you have a link, so the creators share that link and they get a percentage, like a commission from sales. It could also be barter, so they receive something it's not necessarily a monetary transaction. They might receive, for instance, they might stay in a hotel for free in exchange of posting something about the hotel. We also have ad revenue and on platform influencer marketing. So basically on YouTube, like you get ads on the video and the creators receive a portion of that amount. Have subscription tokenization and crowdfunding. So this is really common in streaming platforms. So for instance, on Twitch, you can subscribe to a specific content creator. So you pay a monthly fee, but you also have tokens. So you can buy a in-platform currency, and then you can use that to send like messages with like that are highlighted. You can give a number of tokens. You can use tokens to engage in specific ways, like there are games and things like that. And crowdfunding can include platforms like GoFundMe. It can also be like project-based crowdfunding. Direct selling is also very common, that content creators have their own merch and they sell that. It is usually linked to their social media platforms, but also external websites. And finally, a new one, creator funds, that the platforms directly have funds for creators. So TikTok does that. So it's not intermediated by a brand anymore. It's like the platform themselves are giving money to creators as a way to attract more users. And here's some numbers of the market size. It's growing quite fast, and we can see that's big numbers. So it's evaluated on around $16 billion. That's big. And this is 2016. So in 6 years, it went from a bit less than 2 billion to 16 billion. So that's a huge growth. And it's expected to grow even more in the future. Word here about definitions. So we are using influencer and content creator interchangeably. And on literature, you usually see that as well. So papers might use them in the same context. And we consider that as well, but influencer has this connotation of the commercial intent. So this is a very nice definition. So an influencer is a content creator with a commercial intent who builds trust and authenticity-based relationships with their audience. This is a very key thing of a content creator, of an influencer, and engage with commercial actors through different business models. So basically, influencers are content creators who are engaging with the creator economy. And if you want to read more about that and the implications, there's this very nice report that you can read in the context of the European Union. We'll share the links later. And okay, so far we talked about, well, maybe the nice side of monetization, right? Everyone can become a content creator, can share their interests, can create authentic content. So this is a very nice way of democratizing content, opposed to like traditional media like TV that was much more editorialized and much more centralized. So this is a nice thing. However, there's also maybe a dark side to monetization, that some things that we have to take into consideration and analyze. So this is a great example. We have here former President Donald Trump on the left. In the Oval Office, while he was president, displaying some Goya food products. And that was a post on his Instagram page. And that's very interesting, right? Like, what does that mean? Is that a commercial just endorsement? Is just like, he just likes Goya and just saying that? Is that a political message? So that's very complicated, right? Like, there's many factors involved there. And I think we can see, even especially in Brazil, like with recent elections, we can see that content creators and social media in general has a huge impact in the political context. So this is something to be very careful about. Another thing with the pandemic, in Brazil, we had some big controversies as well. We had the case of Gabriel Pugliese, that one of the OG content creators, like really a popular one, that during lockdown had that controversy with the stories and even deleted her account. And we see that the potential that content creators have to influence both positively and negatively even like public health policies. And we saw that there was a big thing during the pandemic. For instance, the Attila got really famous positively because it was informing the population and talking about how to take care of yourself and why it was important to wear masks and things like that. But we also have cases like Pugliese, negative cases. And the government, we can see in this case that the White House was teaming up, was partnering with influencers to make people vaccinate. So it's something that even governments are aware of, that are engaging with. It's growing even more. And another case with the conflict now, the war, Russia and Ukraine, people really care about what content creators think. And this is an interesting thing. We can also see that in Brazil a lot. There's even the meme with Anitta, like what Anitta thinks about something. People really care about about content creators positioning themselves, which is a very interesting thing because it can be very dangerous, right? But it's also something that can be positive. So during the elections in Brazil, there was a lot of people were really asking some influencers to, okay, what do you think? Who are you voting for? And in some cases, like for instance, when Casemiro, it's a very popular Brazilian streamer, posted about it, it was a huge thing. It was like, I think over 100,000 likes on Twitter. So we see that it has a real effect. So it's not only about back to the original idea of like, okay, let's talk about makeup, let's talk about beauty. It has some very serious societal implications. And the thing is that monetization is at the center of everything, right? The thing that's driving all these people to, not the only thing, of course, but it is a key thing that we have to take into consideration. And what we have right now is that social media platforms are no longer about let's add my friends and share pictures with my family. It hasn't been the case for a long time. But now basically social medias are a space for everything. So we use social media to find products, to buy products, to talk to people, to get your political opinions, to get news. So basically everything, everywhere, all at once. And even in Brazil, we can see that even for some business, they depend 100% on Instagram and WhatsApp. WhatsApp is not really a social media platform, but it's very common that we see business that rely 100% on those things. So this is one indication that, well, we really need to pay attention to these things, and we need to be very careful to think about the implications.
And then maybe to continue a little bit on the trends that we see in social media. So Thales already showed the various ways in which content can be monetized on social media, and particularly by, as we mentioned, influencers as these harbingers of advertising, but also by content creators with additional types of business models. We see that there are also some other types of trends that we need to keep in mind. And one of these trends is basically social commerce. And I'm showing now some slides with an example of what we see from an IP address in the European Union on Instagram. This is an example of a beauty influencer who also has a brand, and this is the shop of the brand. And what happens here is that the shop of the brand, as you can see, this is a professional place on Instagram. It has products. It's very similar to Amazon. It's very similar to, any kind of marketplace that you have in mind that you would maybe go to online to purchase similar products. And the products are very nicely labeled. They're very nicely ordered. And then if you want to purchase them, so from an IP address in the European Union still, if you want to purchase them, then you need to go to a third-party website. So on the one hand, indeed, currently platforms are very much facilitating commerce, but in a way they are, in certain jurisdictions, they are still not the immediate competitor of Amazon, because they're saying, okay, we're just sharing the link. You need to go and visit this link. But the very interesting problem here, and I think at some point, the last time we checked for Brazil, it was the same thing. So there wasn't a checkout button, because in the United States, Instagram does have a checkout button. So Instagram is a competitor of a platform like Amazon. that does more marketplace, selling directly to consumers or intermediating different types of sales of services, of products to consumers. Instagram in the European Union and again, to my knowledge, in Brazil, will point you to this third-party website. Where some other nefarious things are happening, because there was a Felix Krause, he's a German security researcher, and Felix Krause looked at particularly these kind of third-party websites. As you can see here, you click on the view on website button, and you are going to, jeffreestarcosmetics.com in this case, but you are still in Instagram. And that is because Instagram as an application, as a mobile application, is using its own browser. It's called an in-app browser. And Felix Krause has been testing these in-app browsers. And you can see if you just find a friend who you can share this link with, inappbrowser.com on Instagram, you can see a live test of the different type of CSS code, the JavaScript that is going on, that is communicated between your machine and a website like that. And what he found is that the equivalent of what is happening in an in-app browser is the equivalent of what is happening there is the installing of a keylogger. So that is actually a cyber attack, you could say. So if someone wants to really steal your data, steal your information, they would put a keylogger that would be kind of like malware, if I can put it like that. I'm not a cybersecurity expert in any way, but a keylogger would mean, I think that the equivalent that I've seen in literature is someone just standing behind you and looking at all of your passwords and then being able to just reproduce these passwords because they saw them. So this is what Instagram is doing at the moment. This is what TikTok is doing at the moment. And particularly for TikTok, there isn't even an option to use another browser than this in-app browser, which really, in a nutshell, poses so many different issues for profiling and tracking on the internet that we need to be very familiar with in what follows in the next era of social media. Because really social media marketing and social media commerce is here to stay. This is in comparison, this is a screenshot from a product that is displayed on the American IP address phone. And you can see that there's the buy now button. And then what happens when you click on that button is that you immediately get sent to a payment system, which is going to be an in-house Instagram payment system, or at least managed by Instagram. And it is basically the equivalent of just going to a shopping website and purchasing that there, which really begs the questions of, well, social media at the very beginning was supposed to be this idea, oh, I'm sharing photos of my cat and I'm sharing photos of my birthday and my travels. And I also want to see photos of other people in my social circles who share the same thing. Particularly for Instagram in 2016, Instagram went from a social graph, so from a kind of a time-oriented graph. Let's see what kind of posts your friends are making at a given moment in time, and let's see how to order those. Went from that to an algorithmic type of information retrieval graph, meaning that companies and organizations, platform organizations such as Meta, such as TikTok, they are going to try to profile your interests on the basis of the type of content that you consume, and then serve you with additional types of videos that they will think are to your liking. Now, if we compare that and if we merge that with this discussion on the growth of influencer marketing as native advertising, as the idea that you are making a video and you're hoping to get through in your parasocial relationship to your audience and come across as authentic and come across as, okay, I want to show a new product, but I'm also getting money for that product. You can imagine that algorithmic recommendations that are based on our preferences can become a new form of targeted advertising. Also to the extent that, and even in a worse situation, to the extent that this type of advertising is not disclosed. We notice this trend to be quite predominant, and here I would also like to make a quick detour, because we have seen and we're living through what some people call the last days of Twitter. So I was just reading on Twitter that the entire payroll department just quit, but let's see what happens until Monday. These are just completely uncharted times. But the entire discussion around Twitter, I found that to be so misleading, because subscriptions on Twitter are just normal, because subscriptions are normal on all social media platforms. That is one form of monetization. Of course, for Twitter, there are implications such as, how do you actually make valuable content that people would like to pay for in the specific platform affordances that Twitter has been known for, such as predominantly short text forms. Examples of how popular these monetization options, particularly with social commerce, are, for instance, from YouTube, where I think a few months ago, YouTube partnered up with Shopify. Shopify is a Canadian company that does mostly drop shipping. So, for instance, Thales, if Thales wants to start a merchandise line right now, you can just go, you buy Bertaglia.com, and then you start an e-shop there, and you can get your brand printed on mugs, on all sorts of t-shirts, and you never need to actually have the stock, because this is how dropshipping works. You just you are going to have intermediaries who are going to fulfill that for you. So you don't need to own any kind of warehouse where you store your goods. You do not need to buy them in advance. But you can have most often a Chinese company just fulfill all of the orders for you. So you can imagine how popular that is going to be. I even have here an example of some creators from the Netherlands. So this is a family channel, because for some reason, although I don't know how this is in Brazil, but in the United States, on the basis of my understanding of popular culture, the United States had family vlogging as a trend some years ago, but lo and behold, in the Netherlands, it's still a thing. So here we have the Bellinga family, and as you can see, they have made until August this year, they had made around 2,560 daily vlogs of circa 14 minutes, but that is a topic for another time. What I wanted to show you here in this particular screenshot is that you can watch your favorite family, let's say on the internet, on YouTube, and then just below you can engage in shopping. So you can support this family by buying their nice little t-shirts or their nice little hoodie, pink hoodie. So this is an example through which Google and indirectly YouTube has basically teamed up with Shopify and is going full frontal with social commerce. Then again, perhaps to go back to also the entire discussion around Twitter, we see that there is this mantra and there is this very specific narrative that has been built around social networks. We hear this type of narrative also in the work of Joseph van Dijk, also in the work of Dana Boyd. The idea that you have this public space. So social networks are this public space that is very much based on sharing. So you're doing peer-to-peer sharing, as Thales mentioned. You're doing peer-to-peer sharing, and then you have this public square metaphor for platforms. However, that dates from a time when, although there still were transactions between individuals as consumers and platforms, so you would have a contract between these two parties, the invisibility of the performances of the parties. So the fact that you would not really even understand what kind of data you're giving to Twitter as an individual who's just using that platform for free, created this dynamic and created this narrative that, okay, well, it's kind of like you can go into the center of a city and come together, congregate, and have a protest or talk about things. And that's the public space dimension. However, what we see with the monetization and the fact that now any kind of speech that you see on social media is basically content, and that you can make money with that content, and a lot of people actually make money with that content, it really challenges this narrative, because there are a lot of metaphors also for social media platforms being shops. That is nothing new, but I really think that we're living through some very incredible times where this veil between, what is public, what is private, is being very much removed. And we are coming to see that social media platforms are businesses that we are engaging with as consumers, because we shop there, we do transactions there. And of course, the fact that we have political speech, the fact that we do engage still with some degree of our social circle complicates things, but at the bottom of things, at the root of everything, we need to think about the fact that this is a transactional space. It is a space that is determined by contracts, and that these contracts have a commercial goal. And I think from my perspective, also being a private law scholar myself, so dealing with commercial law and contract law, this is very much a game changer. Why is it a game changer? I'm not going to bore you with legal details, so maybe this text looks like it's a little bit too much, but I'll just guide you through it very, very quickly. So the problem is that in the past, from a legal perspective, there has been, there is also Jack Balkin. He's a scholar from Yale University, a professor of constitutional law there, and initially, with the rise of social media platforms, and also with the entire analysis of the speech that is available on these platforms being in a way dominated by North American narratives, we got the false impression that, the worst that can happen on social media is that someone can delete your comment and then you don't have free speech anymore. Of course, there were also a lot of waves of, content that is supposed to be illegal because maybe it's a child sexual abuse material, or maybe it's terrorist content. So these are also very specific policy concerns for regulators when we're speaking about content on social media, and particularly content moderation and platform liability. But one angle that has been completely forgotten is this central root angle that, yes, this space is transactional and we are engaging as users most of the times as consumers. So particularly for influencer marketing, this angle of consumer protection is very relevant because if you have ads on the internet, consumer protection law says that you need to, as a consumer, they need to be disclosed to you as ads. You need, if you have an influencer, and here we have some legal implications, such as an influencer who might have, not enough contracts in a year, who hasn't produced enough money to be considered a trader, to be considered as someone who has, casual commercial activity. Maybe that person will not have to follow and observe consumer protection in the European Union, at least. But generally speaking, if you are Tati, if you are James Charles, and you are engaging with your audiences, then an influencer like this would have to respect in the European Union, to the extent that they are targeting audiences in the European Union, would have to observe consumer protection according to European Union law. And that law, as I mentioned earlier, it's actually nothing special. It's something that a lot of jurisdictions have. The United States has the Federal Trade Act that has Section 5 that has been there since the beginning of the 20th century. And the principles are very basic and very, very straightforward when it comes to these laws. They're in a nutshell, the idea of don't lie and don't mislead people. If you're being paid to say something and you're not saying, I don't want to recommend to you this coffee, but I'm being paid by the company to say that it's good, and I actually don't really like it. If you don't disclose that, that's the equivalent of lying. It's the equivalent of being dishonest. So that is something that the law really frowns upon. And I think that within what Thales was mentioning earlier with the issue of authenticity is something that we need to pay attention to. So these are the legal implications. What has been happening in addition to consumer protection is that media law, and I will come to media law later on in our presentation. What has been happening in the Netherlands is that on the basis of new rules on media compliance, authorities such as the National Authority for Media Compliance have created different types of standards saying, okay, for video platforms, we're going to define influencers in a way as individuals who need to have over 500,000 followers, and they need to post, for instance, at least 24 videos in the last 12 months. And if those conditions are met, then you also have, as an influencer, an obligation to register yourself with this media authority. So the media authority can also have a little bit more transparency around, who's participating in this market, because right now it's very difficult. And to segue into the next section, it's very difficult to really even say how big is this economy, who's participating in it, how are they doing that. But this is the focus of the more computational part that we wanted to share with you.
Yes. So far we've been talking a lot about conceptual things. So we know in theory what monetization looks like, and we know it's big, we know it's diverse. But in practice, how can we analyze that? Like, how do we know what Catalina was saying? How big is it? Who is engaging on that? How are people doing that? And even from a legal perspective, are people disclosing? Are people being honest? Are people being transparent? And these are all questions that require large-scale analysis. And that's exactly what we had in mind when we started this work. So I'll talk about a data set we collected, we created, and this is work in progress. So I'll show you some results, some things we've been investigating, but there's still many things we can do. So I'll tell you a bit about the potential of this data, and if you're interested in collaborating, if you feel like this would be relevant, you can always reach out. I'll show you some things, some research questions, and some results. So our original idea, the first thing we wanted to analyze was to see how content creators, how influencers from different countries disclose or not disclose their sponsored content. So we started from the perspective that different countries have a different regulation and more strict or less strict regulation. So in Germany, for instance, it's very strict. So influencers often do add something to say it's an ad, like most times. While in Brazil and in US is more about like self-regulation. It's not so strict by law necessarily. And we wanted to see the impact of that. And also just to analyze different practices, like how content creators in these different countries are framing sponsored content. So we collected a data set with all posts on Instagram. So this is all Instagram. Posts by 400 influencers from 4 countries, so 100 from each country, Brazil, Germany, Netherlands, and US. And we consider both mega influencers, so anyone above 1 million followers, and micro, so between 500,000 and 1 million. And we selected manually these influencers. So we used a tool, influencer, like a search tool, Hipsy. So they index influencers from all over the world. And we use that tool, we search using these parameters, like based on location, based on number of followers. And we manually went through each one of them to make sure they fit our criteria. And then we collected all data available. And in total, that's over 1 million posts. So that's from all posts. So that's from the start of Instagram. So we even have some posts from 2010. It's very few because 2011 that Instagram really picked up pace, but we do have some data from back there. So we have data from over 12 years. So this is a very interesting thing because we can really see the growth, like the rise, the start of monetization and the growth. So it really allows us to analyze many things. And I'll show you some highlights, some things we've seen so far that I think are interesting. So this is what the data looks like. So this is just the number of posts on average per month from the start. So you can see the first data point there is from October 2010 up to August 2022. So we collected this data set in August this year. And we can see like the first year is very slow. And then there was a boom. And you can see that the peak was 2016. And you might be thinking, why? Like Instagram grew even more. And the thing is that this is for posts. So posts that are posted on timeline, on the feed, not stories. So 2016, I think it was September, if I'm not mistaken, stories were launched. The feature was launched. So people started posting stories, and we don't have that. We didn't capture that because stories are temporary, so they disappear after 24 hours. So we can't collect them in the same way as we did for posts. So that's that explains the drop. And this is already an interesting finding. And you can see Brazil is on the top. So people post a lot in Brazil. I think the top, the account who had most posts had like 12,000 posts. So that's like a crazy number. That's like posting 3 times per day, every day for 12 years. It's like something like that. It's like unbelievable. Followed by the US and then Netherlands and then Germany. So it's something that's kind of expected because Brazil and the US have larger populations, and also the accounts there proportionally have more followers. So it might just be a thing because of popularity. And this is a very interesting one. So now we just selected posts that were disclosed as an ad. And disclosed, I mean, they had clearly either a hashtag saying it was ad. So for instance, hashtag ad in English, hashtag publi in Portuguese, and the corresponding terms in the other languages. We used a few different ones like sponsored, sponsorship, things like that. So either a hashtag, a keyword, so the word was written there, not necessarily as a hashtag, but on the caption, there was a clear, like for instance, saying publi on the caption, or using the paid partnership label. So that's a new thing, not new, but relatively new. So that was released in 2018. So Instagram now has that thing, it shows up above the post, above the photo, like paid partnership with, and there's a brand tag. So we consider these 3 cases as ads, as disclosed ads. And we can see the numbers here are a bit scary because it's very low. And we know for sure that it's not. So for Brazil, the peak around 2020 is like 10%. And we know that's definitely more than 10% of content is sponsored. Like if you just scroll through the feed of popular influencers, you see that's much more than 10%. And what we can infer from this, people are not disclosing their ads. And as I was saying, that Germany has the stricter regulation, and we can see the effect of that. So proportionally, German influencers have way more disclosed posts. And this is a very interesting result as well. This is another thing that's really interesting. So these are the 3 ways I was mentioning, of the 3 ways you can disclose a post that we consider in our data set. So the blue one is a hashtag. So that means that the post had, for instance, hashtag publi. The red one is the keyword. So it didn't have a hashtag, but it did have the word publi on the caption. And the green one is the paid partnership label. So the Instagram feature that was, so it was actually, no, it was 2016 that it was released. And then we can see how it changed through time. And it's a very interesting, especially for Germany. We can see that the German influencers did not adopt that feature as well as in other countries. It's still the least frequent one in other countries, but we see a lot of people, many people started using that label from 2016. In Germany, not. And in Germany, actually, it's mostly the keyword, so it's not even a hashtag. And I'll tell you why. So this is another interesting thing. So one important thing about a disclosure is transparency, right? Like the disclosure should be obvious, should be clear. So when a social media user, when a follower reads a post, they should be able to clearly see that it's an ad. And we measure that by seeing where the disclosure was within the caption. So which position, where it is. Because on Instagram, so if you're using the app, depending on how long the caption is, you have to click on like read more or whatever to see the entire thing. And usually hashtags are at the end, right? So people leave hashtags for the end of the caption. So if you don't click on to see the entire caption, you probably miss the disclosure. So we're measuring that to see the average position, where the disclosure was located in the different countries, considering the different disclosure types. So we don't have the label here, the paid partnership label, because that's a different thing. So that's not something you add to the caption. It's something that's displayed separately. So we don't consider that. But we can see here that in Germany, on average, it's much lower. That means that the disclosures are much earlier on the caption. So they appear towards the start of the caption. And if we analyze it, if we actually go through the content and see and read the captions, what German influencers do is that they usually add the keyword. For instance, let's say it's ad or publi. They add publi as a word on the start and then the hashtag at the end. So they do both. So this is the thing, it's very visible. Because if you start reading, you see there, and then if you finish reading, there will be a hashtag. And I think that is connected to regulation somehow, right? Like there was a thing about that.
There were just cases in Germany. So the thing is that although the principles that I was mentioning to you were very clear from the very beginning, practice really managed to make a mess out of this. On the one hand, because platforms integrated this paid partnership tool, as Thales mentioned, and paid doesn't cover all of the ways that you can monetize and all of the ways in which you need to disclose. So there, particularly in Germany, there were a lot of court cases where you had these judges who had never been on Instagram themselves, and then they had to make sense of, okay, how shall we do disclosures on social media? And there was even a judgment in Berlin, if I remember correctly, that went so far to say that, if you're an influencer and you have a social media account, that's your business. So you should even disclose, you should say it's not commercial under, photos of a coffee that you're drinking that would not have anything to do with anything, but just like some sort of, fuzzy aesthetic. You would have to even disclose that. So German influencers were absolutely just completely in hysterical, in this hysterical confusion of, well, what shall we do? Where shall we disclose? And it is true that I think that what happened in practice and what we see in this very nice graph is that they definitely try to be on the safe side of things. So just to make sure that they disclose so that they don't get fines, because regulation and enforcement were perceived as something very, very fearful, or something to be fearing of in Germany.
Yes. And we can see that, so if we compare the bars on the middle, so hashtags plus keywords compared to only keywords, we can see the difference there. So from hashtags, from the first one to the second one, we can see it drops a lot. That means that disclosures are more visible because the keywords tend to be the start of the caption and not the end. And we can see again, Brazil, the least transparent, so we're winning at that. This is also an interesting finding. So this is what time people post, what time of day. So this is all converted to local time, of course. So we have different countries, but it's all considering the local time. And comparing sponsored and non-sponsored posts. So blue is just a regular post and the red bars are sponsored posts. And we can see that there's a time that between 5 and 8, that there's a peak. So this is something relevant that could be used, for instance, by regulatory agencies or by enforcement agencies to check, like to focus. We know that around this time of day there will be a peak in sponsorship. So this is an interesting thing. And finally, one thing that influencers, there's a lot of research about that, disclosures and engagement. So one thing that influencers mention a lot is that they are sometimes opposed to disclosing because they think that will harm their engagement. They think like people are less likely to engage with sponsored posts. And that's one of the arguments against disclosure. However, we did not observe that on our data set. Of course, I'm not generalizing to Instagram, the entire thing. We have one data set, we have one sample, 400 influencers, and of course, it's not representative of the entire platform, but still it's an interesting result. So let me guide you through this. So we have 3 bars. So the blue one is non-sponsored post, so posts without disclosures. Red ones are sponsored disclosed posts. So there is a hashtag ad there, hashtag publi. And the green ones are also sponsored posts, but they tag a global brand. And we consider a global brand as a brand that had ads in all of the 4 countries. So for instance, Nike would be, so the way we determine that is we took all the sponsored posts, we saw which brands were tagged on them, and we took the overlap. So if any brand was found in posts of all countries, we consider that as a global brand. So the idea here is that if a brand is well known, people know that brand, they're less likely to have a negative opinion about it, because it's different than an influencer promoting a random brand that people don't know. People might be more suspicious about it. So the idea is that global brands, we expected them to have higher engagement, and that's exactly what we observe. But the interesting thing is that actually sponsored posts have had higher engagement on average. So people were actually engaging more often than normal posts. So as I said, this is work in progress. We don't really have right now an explanation for that. So one hypothesis could be things like giveaways, like influencers trying to gain engagement. This is a very common thing. It's also very common in Brazil, like follow this account and comment whatever 100 times and and do the things, and then you can participate in the giveaway. This is one of the theories. It could be, we still haven't verified that, but it could be. But anyway, this is an interesting thing, and it highlights that maybe the sphere of losing engagement is not 100% founded in reality. Of course, this is one data set, one set of observations, but it's an interesting result anyway. And what I wanted to say about this, so as I was saying, we have the data, we were analyzing many things, and one thing that we did that was a very interesting experience. So we had this event a couple months ago in Utrecht with law students in master, what program was it?
Yeah, law and technology.
Law and technology program. So we had law students. We organized this workshop about content monetization, about business model on Instagram from a legal perspective. And we had the students look at the data and label what business models were being used and whether the posts were disclosed. So this was very interesting. One, from like just to discuss the legal challenges and how difficult it is to determine what's going on, and two, because it gives us information and gives us extra context about the data. So from a computational perspective, having that kind of annotation, having that kind of label can be very useful for running analysis like this, but also for things like creating machine learning models that could be used to detect undisclosed advertising and things like that. And one thing that I'm particularly interested in is doing the same thing for the posts by the Brazilian influencers. So if you feel like that would be something relevant to your research, and if you're interested, just reach out. We can organize something like that. So what we did, like we had a workshop about computational methods, like we went through a bit, like talked a bit about machine learning, about data annotation, the things we could do with data. Then we had the legal part, and then we had the annotation part. So this was a very cool event. So if you're interested in organizing something like that, please just drop me an email.
Now going to the monetization of controversy part. So in the last 10 minutes of our presentation, let us tell you also the story of Lovely Peaches as an example of an account on Instagram that poses a lot of controversial questions. This is based on an article, a short paper, I should say, that together with Thales and one of our students in the Influencer Law Clinic, which has been a clinical legal education program at my former university, we wrote together, and we are going to guide you a little bit through the theoretical part, but also through the more practical part, because we have a data set on the base of this paper as well. Before going into that, I had to take Lil Tay out of retirement. Lil Tay is a former influencer. Currently, her whereabouts are not that known because she became incredibly controversial a few years ago when her brother, as it turns out, was making videos of her like these kind of, or photos like this type of photo that were supposed to be very inappropriate for children, because here you can see she's displaying a gangster behavior. This is also something that was visible in her videos. She would smoke, or she would be at least filmed with a cigarette in her hands. She would be really just trying to act very arrogant. So you can see in the comment here, it says, or the post says, more than your rent, more than your auntie, that's 200K in cash. So she had this kind of this type of attitude where she was trying to really brag about certain things that she had in her life. It figures that actually, for instance, these kind of houses where her brother was taking photos of her were the houses that her mother was selling as a real estate agent. And there was an entire scandal with, how as a child who was, I believe, something like 9 at the time, little Tay is being abused because right now she's the face of all of these issues and all of this polarization on in the media and on the TV. And here we have another example. So if you are into internet culture, perhaps you have found this creator already. This is Lovely Peaches. She's a creator from the United States who became infamous on the internet. You can see the last story section that she has about her child. She became infamous because she started making remarks on her Instagram accounts, various accounts, about the fact that she would pay people to rape her child or to have sex with her child, who was basically an infant at the time. She was taking photos of her. I have some examples here. that are actually not that controversial compared to the type of content that she had. But, you know, she would make content such as taking photos of her feces in the toilet. She would eat her tampons, and she would go into restaurants and start twerking next to the tables of families. So I believe that, you know, we can discuss, and this is the entire point of us bringing this up, we can discuss if and to what extent this is controversial, but it definitely has been the type of behavior that has been making the rounds on the internet, relating to the fact that to the question of should this or should this not be allowed. There are two particular videos and photos on the second part of the right part of the slide, where these videos were actually just videos of her having sex, because it has been estimated that her daily job was that of being a sex worker. And here we also have, and Thales was mentioning the idea of democratization of social media, and to kind of channel the work of Zoe Glatt and also of Sophie Bishop. We see that we have a creator with access to the internet, but you know, what kind of content can you make? And if you have a specific type of lifestyle, which might be your choice or might not be your choice, then what kind of content can you make? Are you going to be able to afford, you know, the beautiful Instagrammable kind of, you know, Korean, all sorts of things in the background of your YouTube channel, Korean decoration and stuff like that? New very nice computers or things that you would need as props for such a set. It's very unlikely that you would be able to afford that. So now in the theoretical part and the short paper that we had, we kind of started with the idea that in social media, as we have seen, so we now also have data to back that up, we see that there's this increased competition because there's more and more and more creators. So within this very competitive environment, then the question is, so how do you stand out? And we saw the Corn Kit, and that is this type of very serendipitous type of virality that just appears out of nowhere. But how can you control virality? And here, of course, there's even evidence from all sorts of social media managers and social media advisors that, yeah, if you're going to use controversial topics, this is what is going to make people talk about you. This is what will make people react to you. And because engagement is something that you can sell on social media, then basically this is a very nice kind of skyrocketing approach to becoming famous and making money. However, the problem here is that, you know, if you are going to label yourself as a creator who wants to be very, very controversial, then you're not going to be what, and Sophie Bishop has been writing about this quite a lot, brand safe. You're not going to achieve this brand safety where, you know, Nike will want to collaborate with you because Nike is moving away from, or you know, global brands, as Thales was mentioning, will move away from things that are sensitive, that might create some reputational problems. This is, however, something that perhaps is currently changing, and I don't know of any research on this. So if you are interested in this, also contact us or do research on this topic. You know, there with the start of with TikTok being a place where brands can become also more authentic, Ryanair, the TikTok Ryanair account, brands are getting really spicy. If you look at the Ryanair account on Twitter, you would not consider that to be also even a brand identity that Ryanair would want to have for itself 5 years ago. You know, when brand identities used to be more bland, more safe, and now basically they're just insulting people left and right. So, I mean, that is also changing how we need to be aware of that. But in this landscape, if we're speaking about creators, then the problem is that, yeah, they are very creators, especially who want to really have a more controversial brand about themselves, then they are going to have a very hard time trying to navigate the relationships between brands and platforms and audiences, because the question is, which brands will want to work with them? Which audiences can you attract and which audiences can you capture and keep? And also, will platforms kick you off? And we see that has been the case. So Lovely Peaches was banned from TikTok at some point after she showed her genitalia in a live to Charli D'Amelio, who was at the time a minor, an underage TikTok user. And because of this, we see that there are certain what we call self-moderation strategies. So so for instance, Lovely Peaches would post certain content and then she would delete it in a couple of days or even after one day. With some content, she would limit comments, and then she would kind of juggle between multiple types of accounts on multiple types of platforms. We followed her only on Instagram for a while, but it was even just very difficult to measure her activity because you would never know when a new account would pop up, and then you would have to make sure that you have that under control as well. But most importantly for monetization, of course, that when we're speaking about brands that want to collaborate with very, very controversial creators, for instance, Lovely Peaches is trying to have a musical career, which unfortunately has not worked out for her. But and here we also have the question of talent. What role does talent play when it comes to content creation? But here we see that there has been quite a lot of there have been some links between being controversial and attracting basically scam companies to support you. And this is also something that has been found by other computer scientists who have been measuring conspiracy theory channels on YouTube. And basically, in a nutshell, if you watch conspiracy theories on YouTube, you are going to have a lot of contact, and you're going to interface with a lot of predatory and deceptive ads. So if you think the Earth is flat, it's very likely that you might end up, buying some fake COVID vaccines or fake COVID medicines, not vaccines, or you're going to end up on different websites that are going to give you malware. So the vulnerability happens on multiple levels. This is an example of a link that Lovely Peaches was actually sharing. So this is a signal for us that this was a type of monetization for her, that the company behind this particular opportunity was paying her to share that link. And you can see the HTML code on the right-hand side, and you can see, for instance, on the lower corner, someone from Fairland just got $1,000. So that is basically here, it is called a social proof message here at the bottom of the screen, a social proof message that in other types of literatures, such as computer-human interaction literatures, are called dark patterns because they're supposed to deceive you. There's nobody there from Fairland who just got $1,000. That's a lie. So basically, the idea is that if you are very controversial, you will only be able to get to controversial monetization. The thing is that we also have a data set, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. We have a data set that really made us focus on the question of, can we actually measure controversy also with respect to monetization, the same types of business models that Thales mentioned earlier as well with the workshop that we had in Utrecht with the law students. We had law students from Maastricht University this time. So this happened, I think, 2 years ago or so, where we asked them to label the data set that we got from Lovely Peaches, because from a legal perspective, the idea of controversy results also in the question of good morals. Immorality and illegality are legal concepts that can have very serious implications. For instance, they can undo contracts, or they can prohibit certain types of content, as we see in media law. So our data set actually consists of 3,100 posts. We looked at 3 different Instagram accounts. It was just insane to see how these were managed within the time that we gathered the posts. And we collected the posts within 2 weeks in July, 2 years ago, as I mentioned. We have photos, we have screenshots of videos, so we do not have the videos themselves. And then we have the text captions. We do not have the comments or any other types of data. And then the data set in itself, we had annotation instructions with the students. We have a specific part of the data set where we have only one annotator, and then the goal has been to have 2 annotators for every single post. It seems here that they kind of agree, but we would need to recalculate some of these things. So we wanted to see, can we understand what kind of posts are controversial? And also, what kind of business models do these posts entail? So the reason why we're sharing this with you is not to show you, okay, these are the results, but to also reflect on some issues, because these were our instructions for the students who are labeling the data. And you can see here that we even had different types of definitions, such as a definition for controversy, so leading to public disputes and conflicting views about it, the content when considering shock and public morals. So this was actually based on literature, on controversies. But the thing is that we're trying to also have a reflection and think, do we need multiple iterations? Is it even possible to actually measure controversy? Because it is such a deeply cultural concept. How can we extract from it, even if subjective, perhaps legal dimension of controversy that could have an impact for content moderation? So this has been what we wanted to share with you. We went a little bit over time, but I hope that you found this presentation interesting. Please let us know what your questions are, and let us also mention one more time that we are delighted and honored to be here with you today. Thank you very much.
That moment. Okay, now you hear me. Thank you so much, Catalina and Thales. It was great to have you here and listen to what you are researching right now. We have some questions for the audience, and I also have some questions. I was taking notes while you were speaking, but I already had some questions based on the article you shared with us, Catalina, and I also put the article link on the comments, so everybody that is watching us can check it up later. And the first thing I would like to ask, just to warm up a little bit the conversation, is, and you ended the presentation saying that it's difficult to measure controversy because it depends on cultural aspects. And we have in Brazil many examples to share, and includes, for example, a MC that is a funk singer called MC Melody, who is a girl, a child.
Very familiar. Very familiar.
We talked about MC Melody as well at the University of Amsterdam. She is a funk singer, but she is as well, I don't know if you could label her a content creator, but she is a digital influencer because of the number of followers she has and so on. And she is always involved in some controversy discussions, especially because of the managing of her father and the way she exposes her body. And there is a conflict when you look at this and think like, okay, she's a funk singer. Is the body connected to the things she's doing? But she's a child. So there are those limits in Brazil that I really think that there are many cultural things to look at. Another thing that I was thinking while you were speaking is the call-out culture or cancel culture. In Brazil, we have a trend that is looking to the bright side of cancel culture, which means we talk about violence and hate speech while in a cancel culture situation. For example, if you have been canceled, and it's bad for the person, the digital influencer get upset and so on. But at there is something that happens at the same time. That is the high visibility that the digital influencer gains because of a cancel situation, of the cancel culture process. And it's good for the influencer because they can make screenshots of their metrics of the day. And this is good to show brands how they get a high visibility. So there are so many conflicts, and we see that daily in Brazil. So it's great to hear you because we have so many things relatable to share and to talk that, anyway, I have to say thank you once again. So let's start with a question for our coordinator, William Fernandes, who is asking how you, based on the researches you've been doing so far, is it possible to establish connections between the controversies that you have analyzed and the recommendation systems? Do you see if the goal of being really controversial has something related to being more recommended by platforms? I think maybe YouTube is probably the place where it happens very frequently. Have you identified something like that?
So thank you so very much for your comments. I think I completely align, first of all, to the comments that you mentioned. And I think it is such a difficult thing to study because when you have, so on the one hand, we have society, right? Like forget about social media, forget about Instagram. I mean, people in society don't align as to morality, what morality is. An example right now, I think in the Netherlands, is the example of, how many people should be in a family, like how many people should be parents. Can you have 3 parents and like have a polyamorous family with 7 parents or something like that? And then there are a lot of individuals who have very strong opinions about this. And opinions are one thing. Then I think, evidence is a different thing. So if you have psychological investigations about what can harm children, what can harm other types of groups, that's a different thing. Are these investigations enough? Do we have meta studies? Can we ensure a really like a causal link that we see in studies? This is so complex. Let alone when we're talking also about platforms, and platforms complicate things, and platforms also complicate our view about the world. And Thales, how do we investigate recommender systems? Because this is a very critical point, I think, also in computer science. Yes,
That's a big challenge, because the problem is we can't really observe the recommender system. It depends actually on the platform. So in the case of Instagram, on our specific research, the problem is how we get the data, how we obtain the data is directly going to the profile of that person and collecting the posts. So in that way, it's impossible to establish the connection between the behavior and the recommender system, because we don't know how it was displayed. We don't have access to the feed. And also the feed is relative to each account, right? So everyone has one feed, and we can't do that. So in our research, we didn't, but there's a very good paper actually by a Brazilian research he's a PhD student in Switzerland, Manuel Huerta Ribeiro. I don't remember the name of the paper, but it's like something like auditing radicalization pathways on YouTube. So it's about that on YouTube. So in YouTube is easier because you can search. So you can, the same way you would search on the platform, like typing keyword, you can use, you can do that to collect data, and then you can see the recommended videos, and then you can kind of follow what the algorithm is doing, and they do find that connection. That controversial, in that case, was about conspiracy theories, more things like that, but they do get highlighted by the algorithm. So it does, like someone started watching something about flat Earth, or not even that, something that's not so, okay, that one is not so harmful. So you start with something that's not that harmful, you eventually get to like white supremacy, anti-vaccines. So there is a connection. In our case, we couldn't study that, but there is evidence on the literature that exists.
Those are the filter bubbles, and I think maybe to complement what you're saying. So I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that there's also evidence that sometimes they don't exist. So I think that the filter bubbles, the filter bubbles literature is a little bit all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then so I think that indeed you can have really good studies that really show, that if you start with a specific type of content, then you radicalize. There was also Guillaume Chasselot, who has been writing about filter bubbles on YouTube, particularly with radicalization and even terrorist content. But I think that in the light of also quite a lot of the public backlash against this, YouTube also tried to change its recommender system from this perspective. So I think right now myself, but I'm not a computer scientist, he is, but I think right now myself, in order to understand, if I want to ask myself, do I really understand if the evidence is clear 100% that we do have filter bubbles and that these filter bubbles are harmful? I would not be able to answer this question in the positive, because I think there's still so much that we need to compile, that we need to build on to create this type of meta conclusion. Do you disagree with me?
No, I agree. Indeed, there's, especially talking about echo chambers like filter bubbles, this kind of things. The evidence is very contradictory. Like you find research for both things saying that, especially in like about politics, I think most research is in that sense. You find evidence that it does exist and it doesn't exist. And the problem is I think the problem with research on social media, empirical computational research, is that it's very unreliable, because one big thing is we don't have access to many things. So for instance, we can't really study the algorithm directly, and often we don't have access to a lot of data. So platforms do not make it easy to get access to data. So Instagram does have, so Meta, Instagram, Facebook does have a service, CrowdTangle, that allows researchers and journalists and other organizations to get access to some data, but it's very limited. It has a lot of restrictions. Twitter also has some issues that you can't share data, you can get data, but you can't share data. So that's a problem. Like a lot of these studies are limited and very hard to reproduce because very often you can't get the same data. So they end up being unreliable, and that's why we find all these contradictions.
Great. And while we were talking about filter bubbles, I thought about the book of Axel Bruns, who is an Australian researcher who has the book called Are Filter Bubbles Real? That goes straight to this discussion. Are they real? Are they old? The usual way that you used to get together and something. But indeed, the platforms have their own gatekeepers, and it's connected to the data retrieving and so on. And we have another question from Elena Malaga, who was asking at the beginning of her presentation, while you were showing the monetization possibilities online, and she asked if you have any indication of how much monetization could be from Bitcoin, if you are investigating this as another way of monetization for digital influencers and creators. Have you identified something like that?
Thales?
We haven't, but again, another paper, but the same person, by Manuel Horta Ribeiro. I'm not sure if he's the first author, but it's the same group. So they have a paper about alternative monetization strategies that includes crypto. So they do analyze that. I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly the methodology, but they do analyze that for YouTube. I don't remember if also another platform, but I'm sure that they do for YouTube. So check that one out. But for us, I don't think we have focused on that, right? We don't really.
No. So I think that with Bitcoin, so Bitcoin is a form of payment, right? And then the question is, so what is actually the monetization there? Like, what's the business model? So I think also in the paper that we had in the slides, and we will share the slides with you as well, so that you can have a look at the presentation and also at all the resources therein. But the paper from the web conference from this year, which is called Controversy Brokers. Basically, it showed that you have basically on YouTube, you have a lot of scams that are being promoted to people who watch conspiracy theories. And these scams can be indeed, maybe crypto scams. They can be fake crypto coins. They can be all sorts of services that perhaps you can pay with with Bitcoin. And yeah, so this additional level of collecting URLs and trying to unroll URLs and understanding what is happening behind a specific website that appears in the bio of a specific influencer, that is a second step in such a study. So, but indeed, it's a fascinating question, because we definitely notice that there will be creators who will accept also payment for more direct services. There is, on a completely different note, there is a very interesting podcast by Jamie Bartlett, who's a UK journalist, on a very big scam in the crypto world. So not the current FTX developments that have been completely destroying the world in other ways than Twitter, but it's called The Missing Crypto Queen, and it's about a crypto coin that became a really humongous scam in Europe and then went global. That led to, I think, a loss of around 4 billion euros. And in that particular podcast, there are some implications for these more scammy business models. And if you actually look at Twitter and you try sometimes to use the Missing Crypto Queen hashtag from the podcast, you end up on some accounts of sex workers on Twitter who will accept for different types of services, and they are content creators as well, and they will accept various types of services via Bitcoin.
And while we are talking about scams, we have a phenomenon in Brazil that is, it's very usual for participants of Big Brother Brazil, the reality show, that they become digital influencers instantly after being eliminated from the show. And there is something very curious happening, that they don't make controversial content in a daily basis, but they make ads and publis from harmful brands. For example, they make advertisements of click farms, inviting people to get into platforms where they can gain 2,000 reais in a day, for example, which is more than a minimum wage in Brazil. So there are those barriers, those frontiers that a person who is in a daily basis producing a normal lifestyle, a normal is a bad word, but a lifestyle content, and then there is an ad that is completely the opposite of the content. So I think we have this controversial in this opaqueness stretch. I don't know, I don't even know how to label that, but I would like to know if you have something similar in Netherlands or in the data you have analyzed those digital influencers, content creators who create lifestyle content, but they invest in this ad and that are related to a kind of scam or click farms, for example, really harmful for people who are following them.
So we have in the paper, the cloud chasing paper, we have this example where we looked at the lovely peaches, and then basically it's the same situation, similar to the click farms that you're mentioning. But I think that what this particular phenomenon shows, and this is what we tried to show in the paper with the Instagram data set, the 12-year data set, is that there is something to be said about the professionalization of creators. So there's even literature, for instance, Marieke de Veerman and colleagues from the University of Ghent in Belgium, they did interviews. This was in the book that you were so kind to mention at the beginning, The Regulation of Social Media Influencers, that I was very, very happy to co-edit with my colleague Sofia Rancherdas. Basically, this group of communication scholars, they did interviews with teen influencers. And they were asking them, okay, so what kind of stuff do you promote? And the answers were, well, I'm at the beginning of my career. I'm going to promote everything I get because I want to have the deals. I want to build the portfolio. So I think that what we see here, and it's so typical, I've seen in very anecdotal situations also in completely other countries, the exact situation that you were mentioning is stuff in Brazil with reality TV personalities. They have a certain profile that will be able to attract maybe also some mainstream brands. But the question is, how do they want to professionalize their own brand identity? Do they want to create a very selective, a very specific type of brand identity, or do they just want to get the money? And if it is the latter, they will just not say no to any deal. So they will just, whatever comes their way, they are just going to say, yeah, I'll do that. And for instance, in Romania, where I happen to come from, reality TV stars normally will engage in, slimming teas and vaping and products, which if you compare the enforcement of laws that are similar in Romania and in the Netherlands, the enforcement will be much more strict. And then basically influencers will not promote that, but then in Romania they will. So there is something to be said about the link between how influencers perceive regulation and what they do if they are in any way fearful that regulation is going to change their behavior. Would you have anything to think about on that?
Yeah, just something specific about our data set. So we haven't really investigated that yet. But I think it's something that will be more prevalent on micro-influencers because, as Catalina was saying, it is connected to professionalization. We just expect that more well-established content creators with bigger audiences wouldn't engage in such partnerships, which is not the case in Brazil, right? Because the people from Big Brother, like even if they are famous, even the guy who won, I forgot his name, he was doing he was already famous, he was already rich, he won, and he was doing shady stuff on Instagram. So it's really interesting. I don't think I've seen that here. Do similar things, but for smaller creators. But one thing we're analyzing, not directly connected to controversies, but a way to measure that is seeing on the timeline, to the lifetime of an account of a content creator, how many brands they are partnering with. So when they start, how many sponsors, considering all sponsor posts, how many brands are being tagged, and then the evolution of that, are they the same brands? Are there more brands? So that's not yet getting to controversy, but we can get an idea of exactly, can we observe that phenomenon that when a creator starts, they're basically advertising anything, and then as it progresses, it tends to promote fewer brands, but maybe higher quality. So that's something we're working on, but we don't have any results yet.
Okay, great. And it's great to know that Netherlands is working on professionalization of digital influencers. We have some initiatives in Brazil from CONAR, which is a Council of Self-Regulation of Publicity, but they do not have the power of regulating the market. It's just a possibility of indicating what to do and what not to do. For example, when you mentioned, Catalina, slimming tea, in Brazil, we make jokes about slimming teas because big digital influencers with millions of followers daily announce and promote slimming teas as normal stuff. And not only that, but other things related to health and self-care and something like that. So it's nice to see that there is hope. There's somewhere around the globe, there are initiatives trying to define what could be harmful for followers and so on. So it's great to hear your experience in this scenario.
Maybe just to build on that, because that's a very interesting point that you're making. So on the one hand, we have regulation, but on the other hand, I think we also need to think about and this is why we have these 4 countries that we wanted to represent, and not just focus on the United States, you know? So in 2017, there was the Fire Festival. Everyone started looking at influencers overnight because, wow, they received so much money with the Fire Festival conundrum. For those of you who do not know or do not remember the entire Fire controversy, you know, it was supposed to be this festival somewhere on an exotic island, and you would pay $20,000 to participate in this weird festival. And because of the fact that the organizers paid a lot of very popular celebrities a lot of money, they actually just didn't have money to organize the festival. So it became this fiasco that put a lot of emphasis on, regulators like the Federal Trade Commission going to Kardashian family members and telling them, well, you've posted this ad on your Instagram account about this Fire Festival and you got so much money, you got like $1 million, and you didn't say that this is actually advertising. So this is the surreptitious advertising, the dishonesty and not sharing that. And this was happening in the United States in 2017. If I look at what's happening on Romanian Instagram and Romanian YouTube, these are practices that perhaps used to be interesting in the United States, or they used to be more common in the United States some years ago. So we see that there's this map of practices. We can consider in a way, the United States as being the ground zero for some developments, but I think it's so important to understand how these developments are kind of spilling over into other jurisdictions, into other countries, and the characteristics of these developments. So, and that is, at least to our knowledge, research that hasn't been done. And we're looking to partner also with more researchers to try to geographically map these developments in the future.
Okay, great. You can count on us for that. That would be great. Well, Catalina and Thales, I would like to thank you once again. We have a nice comment here saying that the conversation is great, and it would be good to hear us in a podcast, for example, to extend the conversation. Elena, thank you for your tip. We can think about something related to that. But I would like to thank you once again for being here with us in Brazil. Hope we can meet in person soon in another event. And I would like to say thank you for everybody that was with us today. And thank you so much, Thales and Catalina. I hope to see you again. And I'm gonna excuse me to say a little bit in Portuguese some announcements for our public here. Para quem está aqui, gente, e tem interesse em receber certificação do evento, por favor, completem o formulário do Google Docs que está aqui nos comentários, que a gente vai mandar o certificado para vocês em 2 semanas, enfim, não tardar 2 semanas para vocês receberem. Muito, muito obrigada pela participação de todo mundo. Voltem mais tarde, a gente tem mesa às 2 da tarde, uma mesa Somos Todos Blogueirinhas, e uma mesa às 4 da tarde para falar de influenciadores e plataformas. Muito obrigada pela companhia de todo mundo. So, we're gonna finish our broadcasting with you both. Once again, thank you so much for being here with us. Thales, thank you, Catalina. I hope we meet soon, and I see you guys thank you everybody that
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you. And thank you for those of you who watched. Thank you so much. Bye, Isaf.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.